Ask yourself, why do you admire certain people? Why do you trust certain systems? Who taught you what to fear and what to desire? This is the world we live in. What if power isn't what you think it is? Not the kind that shouts, not the kind that demands, but the kind that whispers until you forget it's there. You imagine power as a crown, a gun, a boardroom filled with suits and signatures. But the most dangerous kind of power doesn't need to raise its voice. It doesn't need to break you. It just needs to guide you, quietly, subtly, and visibly. You weren't born obedient. You were shaped to be. Machiavelli understood something most people still don't. That control isn't most effective when it's loud. It's effective when it's unnoticed. A king who rules with an iron fist will always face rebellion, but a leader who convinces you that you're free never has to fight at all. Real dominance doesn't restrain you. It guides your hand, lets you open the cage yourself, and tells you it was your idea to walk in. A world where the illusion of choice has replaced the presence of chains, where control is dressed in lifestyle brands, emotional marketing, and political theater. You scroll, you swipe, you buy, you follow, and all the while you believe you're choosing. But who designed the menu you're choosing from? That's where true power hides, in the frame, not the content. It's in who gets to speak and who doesn't, in what gets normalized and what gets ridiculed, in what you're told is natural and what is dangerous. You think your opinions are yours, but how many of them were planted? By headlines, by influencers, by schools, by systems older than you? The real power isn't ruling you, it's shaping you. And if you've never questioned who taught you how to think, then maybe you've never really thought at all. Because the most dangerous power isn't the kind you can see. It's the kind that convinces you it doesn't exist. You are told you're free, that you can speak, choose, move, consume, create, that no one controls you, that this is the age of liberation, of progress, of endless opportunity. And yet something feels off. Because if you're so free, why do you still feel so watched? Why do your choices feel so narrow? Why does it feel like every path has already been paved for you? This is the myth of modern freedom, a carefully curated illusion designed to sedate rebellion. You are not being chained, you are being distracted. What if I wasn't actually making my own choices, just following a path someone else laid out for me? I wasn't being pushed, I was being nudged by design, by language, by silence. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. So now I'm asking you, have you really been choosing or just saying yes to what felt familiar? Let's unfold the reality together. Look closer at the phone in your hand, at the ads that seem to know your secrets, at the influencers who sell you lifestyles disguised as personality. You are surrounded by options, but every one of those options is pre-approved, pre-selected, and packaged for your psychological type. Machiavelli once wrote that a ruler must learn to appear virtuous, even if he is not. In today's world, appearance is everything. Power doesn't need to control your body when it already controls your perception. It doesn't need to burn books when it can flood you with information so overwhelming, so polarized, so numbing that you stop seeking truth altogether. You're told to be yourself, but only if yourself fits the narrative. You can say anything, but only if you say it the right way. You can choose anything, but only from the menu they've already built for you. Social media platforms, corporations, political machines. They all whisper the same message. You are free to do what we've already decided is acceptable. And if you push beyond that invisible fence, the punishment won't come in the form of violence. It'll come in the form of silence, isolation, deplatforming, demonetization, mockery. It's no longer the executioner who enforces order, it's the algorithm. You are nudged, not shoved, conditioned, not commanded, and that makes it harder to detect because the prison has no bars, only filters, only likes, only headlines built to distract, divide, and defang. This is permissioned freedom, a sandbox made to look like a world. You get to run, explore, play, so long as you stay within the lines. The moment you try to question the boundaries, the system pretends not to hear you, or worse, makes you question yourself. Because the most effective control doesn't feel like control at all. It feels like freedom. It's not that you're being ruled by kings or dictators anymore. That would be obvious. You're being ruled by narrative, and narrative is invisible, which makes it the most dangerous force of all. Machiavelli was never about brute force. He knew something far more dangerous than war, more permanent than violence, and more seductive than peace. He understood the power of illusion. In The Prince, he wrote that it is not necessary for a ruler to be truly good, only that he appears good. Because people don't obey what's true, they obey what feels true. And what feels true is almost always what's familiar, repeated, beautifully packaged. That is the first rule of invisible domination: appearance over truth. Today, it's not emperors or monarchs who rule, it's brands, tech icons, media voices, social figures who don't hold official power, but hold something far more potent: your attention. They don't need armies, they need followers, likes, trust, control perception, and you control the population. It's not about suppressing the truth. It's about flooding the world with enough noise that no one knows what truth is anymore. And when people don't know who to believe, they default to the most charismatic source, the one who feels the most certain. That's why in a world flooded with data, certainty is the new weapon. And that leads us to the second rule: weaponized morality. Machiavelli warned that moral narratives could be tools, not truths. He wrote that a ruler must be prepared to act immorally when necessary, but always appear virtuous. Today that plays out in subtle but powerful ways. Corporations run ad campaigns promising justice while exploiting labor. Politicians use buzzwords like freedom and equality, not to uphold them, but to disarm dissent. Influencers preach authenticity while manufacturing every pixel of their brand. It's not evil in the old-fashioned sense. It's more refined than that. It's curated, branded, monetized. And here's the third rule: fear over love, but never just fear. Machiavelli believed fear was more reliable than love, but he didn't mean terror. He meant dependency, a kind of psychological debt. If someone makes you feel like you need them, like you'd collapse without their guidance, you won't question their rule, you'll defend it. That's the brilliance of soft power. It doesn't demand your loyalty, it makes you afraid to lose it. And the most genius part? Indirect rule. The most powerful systems don't show their face. They let others enforce their values for them. Social pressure replaces law. Cancel culture replaces courts. Algorithms do what propaganda used to. You are not told what to think. You are nudged, persuaded, incentivized to adopt correct opinions. This is decentralized dominance. There's no throne, no tyrant, just systems that adapt, strategies that evolve, ideas that spread like viruses until your entire worldview was installed like an app, without you even realizing it. So look around. This isn't about kings anymore. It's about what you worship, what you click, who you trust, whose voice fills your silence. Because dominance today doesn't look like control. It looks like charisma. It looks like beauty. It looks like something you already follow. And that's what makes it nearly impossible to resist. You think you're free because no one's yelling at you, because no one's standing over your shoulder with a threat. But control doesn't always come in the form of orders. Sometimes it arrives through silence. And the most powerful kind of obedience isn't the kind that's forced. It's the kind you learn to give willingly, because you're afraid of what happens if you don't. So you stay in line. You adjust your tone. You censor your thoughts before they even leave your mouth. Not because someone told you to, but because somewhere deep inside a voice whispers, "Be careful. Don't say that. Don't stand out." This is how authority embeds itself, not just in government or systems, but in you. It starts early, in families, schools, friend groups. You learn what earns love and what gets you excluded. You learn to read the room, to trade authenticity for approval, to keep your head down, because the cost of exile feels heavier than the cost of silence. And so, you shrink, you comply, you blend in, not to survive violence, but to survive invisibility. Carl Jung spoke of the persona, the mask we wear to adapt to society. At first, it's a survival tool, but over time, we forget it's a mask. We believe we are the version of ourselves that others find easiest to digest. You obey because that mask is safer than the risk of being truly seen. It happens at work. You don't challenge authority, not because you agree, but because challenging it would make you difficult, replaceable. It happens in relationships. You don't say what you feel, not because it's untrue, but because you don't want to be too much, too needy, too intense. It happens on social media. You don't speak your mind, not because your mind is empty, but because your platform might vanish if you say the wrong thing. So you adapt, you correct, you dilute, and soon there's nothing left to filter because the real you never even made it to the surface. You obey not out of fear of punishment, but out of fear of rejection. You self-police because being cast out socially, emotionally, digitally feels like death. This is how quiet authority works. Not with laws, but with norms. Not with violence, but with disapproval. Not with handcuffs, but with invisibility. You silence yourself before anyone else has to. And over time, you forget that freedom isn't about doing whatever you want. It's about remembering who you were before you learned to hide. Control doesn't need to shout when it knows how to whisper. It doesn't need chains when it has colors, rhythms, and patterns that make you feel something. Calm, urgency, longing, fear. You're not being dragged, you're being guided, one invisible signal at a time. This is the psychology of microcontrol, not in the form of threats, but in the form of emotional design. A website loads with soft pastels, rounded fonts, and gentle animations. You feel safe, welcomed. The copy says, designed just for you. But behind the warmth is a blueprint, calculated user flows, optimized decision funnels, brain-mapped color palettes. You're not being convinced, you're being conditioned. Ads don't need to prove why you need something. They just need to mirror you, your insecurities, your aspirations, your most personal fears dressed in high-resolution storytelling. You don't even feel sold to, you feel understood. This is obedience without resistance, influence without awareness. Even in relationships, microcontrol thrives. Tone replaces argument, silence becomes punishment, a sigh, a delay in response, a strategic withdrawal of affection. You adjust, not because you were asked to, but because the emotional discomfort is too loud to ignore. You begin to change yourself, not to grow, but to fit, at home, at work, in public, online. You are surrounded by what psychologists call emotional architecture. Environments designed not to force you into obedience, but to make compliance feel natural, comfortable, rewarded. The algorithm learns what you agree with and serves you more of it. You begin to self-censor, not out of fear, but efficiency. The more you conform, the more visible you become. The more agreeable you are, the easier your voice gets amplified. You don't question it, you just follow the current. This is soft coercion, a system where you still feel like you're choosing, but every option is already framed. Every path has been mapped out for you in advance. You believe you're choosing that career, that lifestyle, that brand, that belief, but maybe, just maybe, those choices were made for you long before you arrived. Because when you're surrounded by symbols of belonging, aesthetics of safety, tones of approval, you start to seek comfort over clarity. And comfort, when strategically placed, becomes a leash you never realize is wrapped around your decisions. You don't need to be told what to do. You just need to be nudged in the right tone, at the right moment, through the right design. Until one day you wake up and realize you've been walking a path you didn't choose, toward a destination you didn't question, because everything along the way was made to feel like home. Waking up doesn't feel like a breakthrough. It feels like betrayal, not of the world, but of the version of you that believed it without question. The version that thought they were making free choices, that their thoughts were their own, that they were immune to control because they could scroll, speak, and move at will. But awareness is not a light switch. It's a slow, painful unraveling. You don't just see the system, you start to see how deeply you've been woven into it, how often you agreed to the rules just to feel accepted, How many times you silenced your instincts just to avoid discomfort? You see the manipulation, and then you see your compliance. That's where the real fear begins. Because it's easier to believe you were tricked than to admit you helped build the illusion. Carl Jung called this the path of individuation, the process of becoming whole by integrating what we've hidden, denied, or abandoned in ourselves. The shadow isn't just darkness. It's everything you were afraid to become. It's the parts of you that knew something was off but stayed quiet. It's your people-pleasing, your blind loyalty, your craving to belong, even if it meant betraying your truth. To be free, you have to see the spell before you can break it. And that requires brutal honesty, not just with the world, but with yourself. What beliefs did you inherit without questioning? What values do you signal for approval, not because you truly live them? What do you consume, not because it's you, but because it's popular? You begin to realize that the greatest battle isn't external, it's internal, because it's not enough to spot the manipulation. You have to confront the part of you that needed it. At first, this awareness isolates you. The noise gets louder. The people around you seem more asleep. You start to notice the masks, the scripts, the small rituals of obedience that once passed as normal. But over time, something shifts. You stop reacting. You start observing. You choose with intention. And in that space between stimulus and response, something opens. Real freedom. Not the kind handed to you. Not the kind promised by slogans or sold in ads, but the kind that begins in silence when you finally say, no more. Because the moment you name the manipulation, it loses its grip. You were never meant to be a puppet, but they built the strings into your habits, into your scrolling, your silence, your desires disguised as choices. They never needed to pull the strings because you learned to move on your own. Now you see them, the frames, the nudges, the illusions. You see where your thoughts were shaped, where your voice was softened, where your steps were guided by something that felt like freedom, but wasn't. So the question is no longer who's controlling you. The question is, now that you see it, what will you do? Cut the strings or keep dancing? If this made you question what you've always accepted, good. That's where awareness starts. But awareness is only step one. The real challenge? Staying awake in a world built to keep you asleep. This channel won't give you easy answers. It'll ask the questions no one else will. So if you're ready to keep pulling back the curtain, subscribe, drop a comment, and stick around. Because the next video shows you the truth,